Istanbul, a city of mosques and bazaars, and at its heart, a museum with secrets dark and strange. Engines of destruction, ancient high technology, a deadly dinner, and a madman in the harem. Secrets hidden in plain sight inside the Topkapi Palace Museum. At the nexus of Europe and Asia, Istanbul is the gateway to the Middle East. On a hill overlooking the city stands a magnificent museum visited by 2 million people every year. They come to marvel at opulent treasures in what was once a sultan's palace named Topkapi. In Arabic, Topkapi means cannon door. How and why Topkapi Palace came to be here is our first museum secret. The story begins with a Muslim sultan named Mehmet II. His weapons can be seen in the Gallery of Armor.
This object is one of the most beautiful examples of the classical Turkish sword design. If you see it as a little curve, this sword tells us that he was a warrior king.
In 1453, at the age of 23, Mehmet commanded a vast Islamic Ottoman Empire. But at its center, where Istanbul stands today, was the Christian city of Constantinople, the last remnant of the Byzantine Empire. Its location on the Bosphorus Strait gave it control of trade between Europe and the East. And over 1,000 years, its surrounding walls had thwarted 23 would-be invaders.
The walls of Constantinople were absolutely extraordinary. There was nothing like them in the medieval world. Here we are standing on the great city walls, land walls of Constantinople, on one of the towers, and we're looking down the line of walls that run to the sea on one side and into a small bay on the other.
The bay is called the Golden Horn, and in times of war, a great chain was stretched across it to keep out enemy ships.
The Byzantines were used to sieges, and they were expert at defending their city.
Constantine XI was the 101st Byzantine emperor. He warned his Christian subjects that should the Muslims ever conquer the city, they would brutalize survivors and force them to convert to Islam, assuring them of eternal damnation. Constantine was determined not to let that happen. Mehmet arrived on April 6, 1453, with an army of more than 80,000 men and 320 ships. He was confident he could conquer the city that had withstood so many previous attacks. But his men discovered that there was more to Constantinople's walls than met the eye. Attackers had to ford a moat and cross a 20-meter terrace to reach the wall. As they battered or tried to climb it, they would be showered with arrows. Those who made it over would discover a second inner wall, higher and more formidable than the first.
They would be met with a hail of fire, javelins, Greek fire, bolts, rocks. It was an absolute killing field for them.
The traditional tactic of climbing and breaching walls was proving futile. But Mehmet had come prepared with new and powerful weapons.
So what he brought in terms of military technology here is obviously the cannons. The largest cannon he had, called Shahi, the grand or the royal cannon, was throwing cannonballs of 600 kilograms.
This monster cannon's barrel was 20 centimeters thick and close to 10 meters long, made of solid bronze. Its cannonballs could travel over a kilometer to reach their targets. Its blast was deafening. Even Constantinople's thick walls could not withstand a direct hit.
Although initially the wall was ruined, the Byzantines quickly developed a very successful defense, which was to replace the stone with earth ramparts. The effect of this was to absorb the impact of the cannonballs, rather like throwing a stone into mud. And this made it perhaps a little bit dispiriting to the Ottoman troops, who, as quickly as they demolished a section of wall, saw it being replaced with something which still worked reasonably well.
Thousands of Mehmet's troops continued to die as they advanced on the walls, hoping the cannons would finally give them the advantage they needed. Day after day, the assaults became stronger and louder.
When the Turks attacked, one of their psychological weapons was noise, a wall of noise moving towards the city.
The cannon blasts shook ships and rattled bones. They were joined by the strange sounds of Ottoman battle cries and the high-pitched whine of Ottoman horns.
This would have come from their Janissary band, drums, trumpets, cymbals. It would have been an awe-inspiring sound to encounter and certainly drained the blood out of the defenders.
Though the Byzantines were tiring, their great walls stood firm. But the defenders would soon discover that Mehmet had another card to play.
On the morning of the 21st of April, 1453, it was a Sunday. They were going to church. They looked casually over the sea walls into the Golden Horn, and they saw to their horror the ships rolling one by one into the water behind the chain.
To outflank the naval defenses of Constantinople, Mehmet slid his ships down the hill on greased planks and logs.
And it was a moment of panic and sheer amazement at what Mehmet had done.
Mehmet knew his bold maneuver would strike a psychological blow.
He was very well informed about the way that they thought, and he realized that the morale of the people was probably a crucial factor in the way that this was going to play out.
Weeks passed. On the 53rd night of the siege, as the moon was waning, a partial eclipse turned it blood red. Inside the city, Constantine's subjects panicked.
And this struck them with absolute fear. It seemed to be possibly a symbol, a crescent moon seemed to be possibly a symbol of the Ottoman Empire.
Suspecting the eclipse might demoralize the defenders, Mehmet ordered an all-out attack.
He marched his men forward in waves in a kamikaze attack to take the city.
Constantine and his best men were there to meet them.
And he locked the gate behind him and hung the key around his neck, so they would do or die with their back to the wall.
Constantine's courageous maneuver would prove futile.
One man, known to history as Hassan, managed to plant the flag of Islam on the battlements, and it put heart into the Ottoman troops. They swarmed forward, and they just simply overwhelmed the exhausted Byzantine defense.
The walls that had protected Constantinople for 1,000 years had finally been breached by the superior forces and tactics of the young Sultan named Mehmet.
And it's at the moment that he passes through this gateway that he takes on the title by which he's known to the Turks as the Conqueror.
Mehmet converted the city's largest cathedral into a mosque. It seemed that Constantine's worst fear was coming true. But if he'd lived to see what Mehmet did next, he would have been surprised. The conqueror put away his sword and met with leaders of all the city's religions.
He's the one who made a meeting with all the other churches and asked them to tell their faith to him and promoted their faith.
Christians were allowed to worship their God in peace.
That's absolutely a legacy of Mehmet II, of a man who had an imperial vision and who managed to keep all these people of different worlds, different languages and religions under one power.
And in a city that has grown far beyond its protective walls, many Christians live here still. The cosmopolitan character of Istanbul began with Mehmet's multicultural vision. And as for the secret of why Topkapi Palace was built in this location, Mehmet needed a place where he could spot would-be invaders. And we suspect he just enjoyed the view. Up next, the secret of the oldest map of the New World. Topkapi Palace was the center of the sprawling Ottoman Empire for almost 500 years. In the 20th century, when it became a museum, an army of curators began to catalog the treasures of the sultans. In a bundle of papers, one scholar noticed this faded document. It is clearly a map, but the coastlines are not immediately familiar. But to geologist Steve Dutch, the map is a marvel.
For a couple of reasons. It shows Europe and Africa. The coast of Brazil is reasonably recognizable. And it's unusual in several respects. It's one of the first maps that shows the Americas in much detail.
Initially, it was hailed as the long-lost map of Christopher Columbus, the chart of his voyage of 1492. But it can't be, because the writing is in Turkish. The date translates as 1513, and that's very strange, because as of 1513, no Arab explorer had sailed west of Africa. And at the same time, Columbus's maps were secured in a castle in Spain for Spanish eyes only. So how does this map exist? And what is it doing in Topkapi Palace? Those are our museum secrets. The story begins in 1453, as Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror takes control of Constantinople and the sea lane just beyond his palace door. Control of the Bosphorus Strait gave his Ottoman Empire a monopoly on trade with India and China, including unique imports, still for sale today in Istanbul's famous spice market.
The space trade was a one-directional trade, actually. Teşekkür ederim. It was a one-directional trade from the east towards the west.
Yusuf Civelekulu is the grandson of one of the first Topkapi historians to see the New World map.
They would come on ships or on caravans, and in Istanbul, they would change into vessels to Europe. The kind of spices which were traded were black pepper, saffron, dried ginger, turmeric. It was a necessity for the cold winters of Europe, where you had to conserve your food for survival purposes.
The spice trade monopoly made the Ottoman Empire rich, but Europeans grew tired of paying the Ottomans sky-high prices. So some, like Columbus, sought a new route to Asia by sailing west.
The Ottomans were interested in what the Europeans were doing in the West because they felt that this was a competition. They knew that their monopoly was put into question.
To discover what Columbus had found, the reigning Sultan assigned his admiral, Piri Reis.
His full name was Haji Piri Ahmed Muheddin Reis. The Haji means he made the pilgrimage to Mecca. Piri means he was an elder. Ahmed Muhaddin was his given name, and then Reis means a captain or a chieftain.
But Piri Reis wasn't an explorer. He had a different skill.
Kalkıyor muyuz? Evet.
Yusuf relies on this skill when navigating the difficult waters of the Bosphorus.
Hayırlı seyirler.
He consults a copy of a map drawn by Admiral Piri Reis 500 years ago.
Here is a tower, which is still to be seen, and you have here the Bosphorus going further north. A modern map of Istanbul would be not very different from this.
Today, the sea lane is crowded with ships from many lands, just as it was in the time of Piri Reis. As an Ottoman admiral, he could order the seizure of any ship in the harbor to search for charts and interrogate the crew.
This could be one of the Venetian traders in Istanbul who brought with him a chart.
When any ship was seized, one of the main objectives was to go immediately to the bridge before the charts are destroyed.
From these sources, Piri Reis pieced together New World coastlines. And he drew some of the creatures and monsters that sailors claimed they saw. But there were large regions missing. Piri Reis couldn't complete the map without learning what Columbus had discovered.
One of his sources is a Spanish slave who has been with Columbus several times on the voyages to the Americas and who has described these coastlines for Piri Reis.
This inside information was just what Piri Reis needed, and it makes his map our closest link to the long-lost map of Christopher Columbus.
It manages to achieve a really remarkable degree of internal consistency, and I describe this as a first-class piece of naval intelligence.
When Piri Reis presented his map to the Sultan, the Ottoman ruler was surprised by the existence of new lands and delighted that the western edge stopped short of revealing a new trade route to the spice-rich lands of Asia.
This map was considered extremely valuable also by the strategists of the empire, by the Sultan himself. He must have been excited.
It meant that for a while at least, the Sultan could keep his Asian spice monopoly. And thanks to an able admiral, the Ottomans had learned the outlines of the new world without leaving home. Next on Museum Secrets, a Turkish delight becomes a deadly dessert. Topkapi Palace Museum is peaceful at night, but when the Sultans lived here, it's likely they had trouble sleeping.
Being a very elevated personage in that period would have been a struggle and quite frightening. There would always be people who are out to get you.
A traitorous vizier, a jealous wife, or an ambitious son. Many had a motive to murder a sultan. And during the Ottoman Empire, 10 murderers succeeded. Jason Goodwin thinks about palace murders quite a lot because he sets his novels right here in Topkapi, in a continuing series featuring a Turkish detective named Yashim. Today he's here to find a museum secret, the best way to kill a sultan. For research purposes only, of course. And he thinks the Sultan's bathroom might be a good place to start.
Perhaps there he's at his most vulnerable. So even at the heart of his own palace, he can never be quite free of his kind of night terrors.
But his guide, curator Canan Cimili, thinks Jason is on the wrong track.
Sultans always used to live in these places because for security, he always looked by himself.
I see. So he went, when he was bathing,
yes,
he bathed by himself? Mm-hmm. And this screen, like this, so he goes inside and he shuts.
Yes.
Does he lock himself in?
Inside his gilded cage, a sultan would be hard to kill, so Jason will need to think up a new murder scheme. He decides to think on a full stomach by having a meal at this well-known Istanbul restaurant. Here the food is prepared just as it was in Ottoman times. Owner Batur Durme is determined that every dish should be fit for a sultan.
Did you find these recipes? I mean, with the research for this?
Actually, first we started off with just the dish names. From 20 to 40 different dishes were placed on the table, and Sultan would pick up 3, 4, 5 that he fancied, and he would taste them. The rest would go back to the kitchens untouched.
As Jason enjoys the meal, his author's mind is hard at work. He's wondering if it might be possible to tamper with the Sultan's food. To find out, he heads to the Sultan's real kitchen. The Sultan's meals were cooked in these rooms in Topkapi Palace, along with the meals for the Sultan's entire court.
There are about 5,000 people who needed to be fed every day in Topkapi Palace. So the kitchens were correspondingly huge.
After an incident in the 15th century, when Mehmet the Conqueror dropped dead in his chair, the kitchen was reorganized to enhance security.
There was one kitchen reserved entirely for production of food for the Sultan, and only for the Sultan. The moment it leaves the kitchen, it's covered in a cloth, and this cloth is tied with a ribbon, so that no one can tamper with it between the kitchen and wherever he happens to be, which could be quite a long way.
The only chance for tampering would be at the moment the food is prepared. And the would-be assassin would need to choose poison that wouldn't change the taste or color of the Sultan's food. Jason thinks he might discover a possible poison in Istanbul's spice market. He doesn't really expect to find it on display, but he hopes one of the vendors might have some useful information.
You know, when I'm writing my detective stories, I'm always looking for some sort of poison I can use for the murder and...
Poison?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Can you think of anything good?
I have a poison like this. You want to try? Turkish poison. Very spicy. Also burn.
You just want me kind of gasping, huh?
Yeah.
You know, we were interested in the ancient times in the harem.
Yes.
When the women tried to kill each other, maybe poison each other.
Yeah. Melissa tea we have. Melissa.
Melissa.
That's correct. Melissa.
Okay.
Melissa here.
So this is good. If someone is trying to get you, then you drink the Melissa tea and you feel calm.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that in old times that the people would use as a poison?
It's killing is too dangerous. Nice. I know because I don't like this. It's killing. It's killing.
No.
Understandably, some of the shopkeepers are a little shocked at Jason's questions, or suggest options that didn't exist in the Sultan's time, like this roach poison.
Okay. So you just sprinkle that around, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you might dust the sugar onto somebody's baklava, maybe, yeah.
Clearly that won't work, but Jason isn't out of nefarious ideas yet.
The women in the harem, they had creams and powders, you know, things for their hair, things to make their skin lighter or to make their skin softer.
In their skin whitening powder, the active ingredient was white arsenic. The arsenic would be invisible on top of this traditional Ottoman dessert, and the Sultan wouldn't taste it because arsenic is sweet. But unfortunately for Jason, the Sultan's kitchen had one more safeguard.
There was the head taster guys. One of his duties was to guard that no one interferes with those dishes.
So if the Sultan's dessert was laced with arsenic, the only person who would die would be his food taster. Poison may not be the best way to murder a Sultan after all.
There were lots of other opportunities for kind of skullduggery.
In a palace full of potential murderers, for even the most careful Sultan, there was no guarantee of getting to dessert. Next on Museum Secrets, rebuilding the world's first robots from the 13th century. Inside the Topkapi Palace, only a fraction of the museum's vast collection is on display. Many of the most important artifacts are preserved in the archives, and one is so fragile that it is rarely brought into the light. It dates to 1206 AD. These fanciful, colorful drawings suggest it might be an illustrated children's book, but it isn't. Historian Bert Hall has been studying the Topkapi book for decades.
The Book of Ingenious Devices was written by Ibn al-Razaz al-Jazari early in the 13th century. It is a kind of encyclopedia or treatise that covers a number of different devices.
In the book's preface, al-Jazari claims that every drawing is of a device he made to bring delight to the Sultan's court. But many have a level of complexity that seems impossible in the 13th century. Are they pipe dreams, or did the ingenious devices really work? That is our museum secret. Our investigation begins in Europe in the Dark Ages. There weren't many devices here, ingenious or otherwise. Most of the ancient science of the Greeks and Romans had been forgotten. But in the Islamic world, Arab scholars preserved and studied ancient science.
At a time when Westerners had all but forgotten about it, the Muslims were working towards new generations of ever more ingenious devices.
Nearly all of al-Jazari's devices involve the flow of water. This may be because mechanized irrigation is a necessity in a dry land, but there may also be a spiritual dimension.
From the Islamic perspective, the Quran speaks very highly about water, and in particular, there's a verse that really stands out, and God Almighty says, water is the source of life.
In Al-Jazari's devices, water is a source of power. But are they just designs, or do they really work? To find out, Bert Hall has decided to try to make one of his own. In Toronto, he enlists the help of Chris Warrilow, a film and stage props maker.
I'm amazed at all the stuff you've got here.
Why, thank you very much.
Well, this is a medieval drawing from the work of Al-Jazari. This is for hand washing, and the idea is it's designed as a model of a servant that pours water over the user's hands, then the water drains out, and the servant offers the user a towel.
Is this the only thing that we have to go by?
This is the best that we have to go by. There's other versions of this, but they don't give you any more information than this one does.
Okay. Okay. Oh.
So where do you think we go from here?
I would say a hardware store.
Chris is not the first to try to reconstruct Al-Jazari's devices. A few can be found in the Museum of the History of Science and Technology near Topkapi. Like the mechanical servant girl, many of these devices feature human figures.
Remember, in an age before television, to see something that looked like a human being going through motions that looked like human motions, banging a drum, ringing a bell, playing a flute, that sort of thing, was quite the spectacle.
But none of these models move. Chris hopes to have more luck with his servant girl. But why was so much ingenuity devoted to simply offering a towel? The answer can be found in a mosque. For the ritual that every Muslim must perform before answering the call to prayer.
We have to make ablution and a specific method of washing through the water that brings the purification before we commence our prayers and our acts of worship.
In the 13th century, when a sultan purified himself, a servant would be standing by to give him a clean towel. The mechanical girl was designed to do this work without human assistance, and that makes her a kind of robot. If Chris can make her work, it will mean that Al-Jazari designed the first robot in history.
I'm interested to see if something can be made with modern materials that would imitate the actions of a design that's almost 1,000 years old.
Oh, hi, Bert.
Hi, Chris. What do you got for me?
I really hope this meets with your approval.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see it work.
Okay. Alrighty. So we start with dumping our water in our first tank on top. This is our main reservoir.
Can I pull the plug?
Pull that little plug straight up. And there we go. You may want to step back. So it will fill up our basin almost to the brim before it starts siphoning out. So you now have a few moments to wash your hands.
Yes.
Almost overflows.
Almost overflowed. And it's starting, the float is starting to float.
We should see our attendant offer us the towel, and there we go.
Oh, I see. It works slowly then. Very impressive.
Want to do it again?
Yeah.
There he goes. There was a bit of a concern that it wasn't going to work. I really couldn't test the individual pieces as I was putting it together, but it worked.
This means that using only water as a power source, Al-Jazari created the first working robot in history. And the robot is far from his most complex invention. Some transmit water power through an elaborate interplay of levers and gears.
Would there have been anything of this nature in Europe or elsewhere?
Not really. We know that things like this were given by Muslim rulers as gifts to Christian rulers. They serve the same function of public admiration, a kind of mechanical marvel to look at.
In their own marvels, Europeans adapted some of Al-Jazari's mechanical technology, including his most far-sighted innovation, now known as the crankshaft. Today, the crankshaft is an essential part of every truck and automobile. Technology that a Muslim visionary shared with the world in his book of ingenious mechanical devices. Up next, Secrets of the Harem. The Topkapi Palace Museum was once the hub of the Ottoman Empire. 3 centuries ago, the palace grounds were as crowded as they are today, with courtiers, generals, scientists, and slaves. But down a long pathway lay a part of the palace that only the Sultan and a select few could enter. The name of this place might be the only Arabic word you know: harem.
Nobody knew what went on inside the harem. That was absolutely secret. I mean, the word harem means forbidden. It's a forbidden area.
Harem. The word conjures Hollywood fantasies of sex slaves and orgies, all to please the all-powerful Sultan. And in the real harem, the Sultan had many women to do his bidding. Today, Janan Jamili is the harem's curator.
Burası aslında gözdeler taşlı dediğimiz mekanlar. Hemen gördüğünüz balkonlarda her bir gözde için 3 ya da 4 pencere bir gözdenin kaldığı mekandır.
The room seemed designed to encourage sexual passion.
Rokoko süslemeleriyle yapılmış odada hakikaten Fransa'da dahi olmayan, Türk beğenisine göre hazırlanan çok ince işçilikli bir oda hakim.
But in one wing of the harem, bars on the windows hint at a different story. The rooms beyond are locked, each one a prison cell. This museum's secret will reveal who was imprisoned here and what happened when they got out. Women were brought to the harem when they were very young, snatched from their homes in outlying Christian regions of the Ottoman Empire.
Be brought in, they would convert to Islam, and they would go through a whole process of education. It's a very beautiful place, but it's actually quite a severe environment. And, you know, I often compare it to, it's like a kind of really tough girls' boarding school.
Just how tough can be seen in this Spartan room, where women of the harem wrote messages 300 years ago.
Duvarlardaki yazılar bize bu yapının son dönem, yani genellikle son dönemlerde kadınların cezalandırılmak için burada kaldıklarını gösteriyor.
The inscription reads, "When someone lost a mirror, I was accused of stealing it."
Buradaki kadınların okuma yazma bilmesi burasının aynı zamanda bir eğitim kurumu olduğunu da göstermektedir.
After receiving her education, a young woman would be presented to the Sultan. She would soon discover that the Sultan didn't just have sex on his mind.
The idea really behind the harem for the Sultan was that he should have heirs. And that's why it's not as sexy as we like to think, because really it was just about procreation. And it wasn't about having a great time while he did it, it was just about getting boys out.
Any son of a sultan was in line for the throne, so when a new sultan was declared, all his brothers and half-brothers were potential sultans too. Every new sultan began his reign by eliminating the competition.
The guy who took power immediately had all his brothers rounded up and killed, so that there would be no dissension in the state, so that he would rule unchallenged.
Even the sultan's youngest brothers would be put to death.
The killing just got sort of too gross, and people were offended. 19 boys, perfectly healthy, good boys, and they're kind of taken out to the burial grounds, and they go through the streets of Istanbul, and everybody says wailing, and this is a terrible event.
Revulsion led to a ban on such brutal killings, but the sultans still needed a way to contain their brothers' designs on power. And that brings us back here to these barred windows.
Behind us here is the, what they always refer to as the notorious kafes, or the cage. The new idea was that the brothers would drag out their existence here.
One of the first boys to grow up in this prison was Ibrahim I. Locked up with his siblings when he was just 2 years old, Ibrahim was given food and shelter, but little else. He was deprived of love and even human contact. After 22 years, when he was told the Sultan had died and he was next in line for the throne, Ibrahim believed it was a cruel joke. He refused to budge until someone proved that the old Sultan was really dead. When Ibrahim walked out into the sunlight, he struggled to adjust.
He just went on a sort of, on a major spree.
Like a sultan in a Hollywood movie, he tried to make up for lost time. He had sex with a new partner every night, ignoring his official duties. And as for the prison where he suffered for so long, he expanded it.
And actually not just in this kind of handsome-looking building, but in a whole warren of rather kind of dingy little sort of hovels up above the corridors. So you had nephews and uncles and brothers and so on, all these guys who were living in various states of kind of neglect.
So many years in the cage had unhinged Ibrahim's mind. He began to suspect his harem was unfaithful. What he did next was insane.
So they were all taken to the edge of the Bosphorus, out on a boat. Weights were put around their feet and they were thrown into the water where they all drowned. A fisherman, later on that day, he dived down and found himself, to his horror, amongst this sort of grove of beautiful women, all bowing gracefully with the passing tide.
When the news reached the palace, Ibrahim's courtiers took drastic action. They marched him back to his gilded cage in the harem, where he was discreetly strangled. To give a man nothing, and then to give him everything, is a recipe for disaster. And perhaps that's why the Sultan's harem really should be forbidden. Up next, the secret of winning an unwinnable war. Topkapi Palace did not become a museum because the Ottoman rulers wanted it that way. In fact, the sultans might still be here today, except for one miscalculation. In World War I, the reigning sultan backed the Germans. Even after his army was crushed by the Allies, he made no attempt to make peace. After the war, a popular uprising replaced the Ottoman Empire with the democratic nation of Turkey. The Sultan fled, not just from his palace, but from the country. The Turks were proud of achieving freedom, but it came with a loss of identity. If they were no longer Ottomans, who were they? Turkish archaeologists sought the answer in the distant past, looking for evidence of a Turkish culture before the Ottoman Empire. And today their discoveries are on view here, in the Archaeological Museum just outside Topkapi's walls. The finds are over 2,500 years old. Historians believe they were all made by a people called the Hittites. But their works exhibit so much variety that they do not reveal a single cultural identity. Were they warriors, scholars, hunters, or something else? That is our final museum secret. We begin our investigation in the desert valley of Tel Tayanat, where archaeologists have spent decades digging methodically, layer by layer, into the past.
So what we're looking at here is actually the remains of a temple from the Neo-Hittite period, from the 9th to late 8th century. The actual temple itself is rather modest, comprised of 2 small rooms.
The temple was the center of a Hittite town.
And we know it was destroyed in 738 BCE by the Assyrian empire builder Tiglath-Pileser III.
This Assyrian stone carving shows Assyrians cutting off the heads of the vanquished Hittites.
It's essentially meant to intimidate, to signal to the local vanquished community that if you did not toe the line, that's what you could expect to happen to you.
It appears the Turkish identity may be linked to a defeated people. But what about the Hittites' earlier history, say 300 years before?
Well, okay, so we've been working on exposing the rest of this room and the rest of the architecture.
So we have actually a room here that we've excavated down to the floor, and then a second room here of some large building that we've just begun to uncover that's part of, could be an administrative building, it could be a palace maybe.
These earlier Hittites lived on a grander scale.
So they produced beautiful works of art, large sculptures of lions and reliefs of various mythological scenes that reflect their religious traditions.
They protected their treasures behind high walls.
They produced these monumental citadels with massive fortifications, large, beautifully carved sculptural reliefs. So they were into monumentality in a remarkable way.
And these pottery vessels suggest they paid for it all with agriculture and trade.
I actually think that they were probably quite sedentary. They built large cities, they were good farmers.
So perhaps the Turkish identity is rooted in trade and monumentalism. But when we dig even deeper into Hittite history, the picture changes once again. Hittite tablets from the 13th century BC tell of an army of chariots, the fighter jets of their day. Like the Ottomans, the earliest Hittites used their might to expand their empire across the Middle East. They even threatened mighty Egypt. In 1275 BC, the legions of Pharaoh Ramses II attacked. Both sides put everything they had into the battle, 5,000 chariots in all. Casualties mounted. Neither side could gain advantage. It seemed they were fated to battle each other into oblivion. And at this moment, the Hittites did something no Ottoman would ever have done. It was the defining moment for the first Turkish people and for their enemy as well. What happened is written in the Hittite language on this stone tablet in the Archaeological Museum. And in Cairo's Egyptian Museum, the same text is inscribed in Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Both sides retreated, and I think they realized they probably couldn't control or dominate the other. And so instead they reached a diplomatic agreement, a détente, if you will, to leave each other alone.
The agreement is commemorated at UN headquarters in New York as proof that peace is possible, even in the Middle East. And if the Turkish people are still looking for something to define them, they can take heart. Along with all the Turkish people have given to civilization, their ancestors wrote the world's first peace treaty. In this palace filled with treasures of the past, for every mystery we reveal, far more must remain unspoken. Secrets of the brightest minds and of the darkest souls. Hidden in plain sight inside the Topkapi Palace Museum.